Billy, how you doing today?
Oh, we're rocking and rolling, Theo. It's my favorite time. We're going to talk tight ends.
I know. I said to Billy, I said, yesterday we had our first guest we've ever had. We had JJ Zachariason. So we get a big, awesome guest with a national following. We talk about very generic positions. We talk about the running back position. We talk about the wide receiver position. We talk about your upcoming rookie drafts. And then today we decided we're going to take, a big leap and we're going to get a little bit weird.
Curveball.
And we're going to talk all tight ends here. It's kind of like your favorite television show where it's been pretty normal. And then all of a sudden it's like a Sopranos where Tony's in a dream sequence for like 45 minutes. That's going to be today's show, Billy.
Everybody just logged off. I just saw like live count go from 50 to 3. So everyone's like, tight ends, I'm out. I'm later, Theo. I'm out. I'm not doing this.
Tight end Twitter and tight end fantasy is always like, certain people like it more than others, but it's a necessary build. Billy, it's, and I know, especially in the FFPC where we play with those tight end premium, you've got to nail that position. You can do it different ways, but you need to have weekly production from that position if you're going to take down a lot of money in the season.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you can hit on those late tight ends, it is such a huge advantage versus people who are spending that early draft capital. We have the Travis Kelce's who are just outperforming the field left and right year after year. But if you can find somebody that's finishing in that back end tier 1 or maybe that high end tier 2, and you're able to get late in drafts, I think it's a massive advantage versus the field.
It's also an interesting one because every single season we see guys seemingly come out of nowhere, guys who are not drafted in the first 15 rounds, 20 rounds, who end up being impactful for our fantasy teams. Dalton Schultz is a fantastic example. This week, within the last week, he just signs with Houston. He kind of made his bones as an undrafted guy who was like a league winner. And we think back over the years to Darren Waller in 2019. He started getting drafted, but you're talking about a guy that you were drafting from rounds like 12 through 20 who ends up making this massive, massive impact for your fantasy team. It's the one position where sleepers really seem to hit. Running back, you occasionally get these guys who, take advantage of an injury, maybe a backup, but we kind of know about those guys, the handcuffs in the preseason. What do you think it is about the tight end position where guys can kind of come out of nowhere and make big impacts?
I think it's a few things. One, usually injuries at some point catapult the tight end up the performance charts. And then you also have offenses, trying to get maybe a younger tight end more involved and they are phasing out an older tight end. It also is going to be, red zone packages that they have success in and they start utilizing them more throughout the field, or maybe they struggled in their blocking schemes. And then as they kind of developed and became more comfortable blocking, then they allow them to start running routes, because people forget the tight end position is one of the hardest positions in football to learn. And that is why tight ends take so long to develop, right? You are not only learning blocking schemes, but you're also learning the route trees. And so by, fantasy perspectives, we're just hoping these guys burst onto the scenes and are successful from day one. But from an NFL standpoint, where we need to remove our fantasy hats, we have to remember that they have more than one assignment. It's not just catching the ball, it's also blocking.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Kyle Pitts, during his rookie season was very interesting. He ended up having production, but a lot of these rookies, they take a little while. Even the ones who make a big impact towards the second half of the year, they might have a very quiet start. You think of Pat Freiermuth, a guy who's been a very solid fantasy player in his career. It took him a while before Mike Tomlin really leaned on him. If you recall his rookie year, it was him and Eric Ebron, and they were kind of splitting the usage. Muth gets an opportunity and runs with it, and he was a guy in our lineups for let's call it like weeks 9 and on. So it really, that learning curve is a tough one. And I think that this year we're kind of back to it where you're going to have to weigh whether you want exposure to some of these rookie tight ends, because, it's going to be one of the highest drafted positions historically, like for what we're talking about in day 1 and day 2. You're going to see 8 of these guys get drafted. So you're going to end up with a bunch of these rookies where you're going to say, hey, do I want to draft this rookie who seems very exciting? Who might have a little bit of a learning curve versus, this veteran who we think could take a step up. So it's definitely a great year to take a deep dive into this position. But Billy, I really wanted to get your opinion on a couple of the latest news events before we get started with the tight ends. And a quick reminder to everyone, if you didn't listen to our show with JJ Zachariason from yesterday, it was fantastic. Highly, highly recommend you go and listen to that one. But Billy, I first want to get your reaction to this Cleveland Browns New York Jets trade. Kind of out of left field, but how are you feeling about Elijah Moore right now in Cleveland?
I think it's good for his fantasy outlook for 2023. I think we can all agree that a change of scenery was needed for him to kind of revitalize his career. I did the recording with Dave on the Dominator last week, Dave Richards from CBS. And he had kind of projected that the Elijah Moore would be part of the trade package for Aaron Rodgers, which I really liked that idea. And I don't think he's wrong, right? We did see him move to Cleveland, but I think that they needed that extra round 2 pick in order to get this Aaron Rodgers deal done. I think that this is all still in the works. And I think that this was part of the greater puzzle from solving the matrix of Aaron Rodgers landing inside the Jets. And I do think, though, that it's going to be good for his output for 2023. I haven't finalized his projections here on Cleveland yet, but just kind of looking at the AFC North and taking a look at the opportunities that were available inside of the passing game for the Browns. Currently, like I had David Bell slotted for, prior to the trade for a 10% target share. I had Amari Cooper projected for a 26% target share. David Njoku at the time was 15.5% target share. Harrison Bryant was 6.5% target share. Donovan Peoples-Jones was 18% target share. So I think it's safe to say that all of these players will see a reduction in some capacity in target share. We'll probably see somewhere in the neighborhood of 13.5 to 14.5, maybe 16 at the highest for Elijah Moore inside of this offense. And so I'm excited to see what the number is officially. I'm going to work on that tonight, and I'll have that updated on the rankings for tomorrow over at Player Profiler.
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple of interesting things there. And apparently I'm reading our YouTube comments yesterday, Billy, and I used the word dusted too much, so I'm not going to use the word dusted, but I do think that David Bell is effectively ruled out of your projections. I think you and Dario can take a little break on that one, because it's going to be difficult to see David Bell make a leap with Elijah Moore there. I mean, Elijah Moore, you're talking about a guy that we were so excited on as a community, maybe overly excited, but he had some just tremendous productive weeks. The sample size was small, but in terms of all the metrics, he had like that 6-week span as a rookie where he really flashed. Then unfortunately ends his season on an injury, and last year was really a complete lost season. He was beefing with the coaching staff. We find out that he basically told off the offensive coordinator. That news came in the offseason, cursed the guy out. A lot of us fantasy managers also wanted to curse him out, because he wasn't using Elijah Moore. And I definitely had your back on that one, Elijah. But it's like, this is a great opportunity. We saw Amari Cooper when he moved to Cleveland. His ADP was moved down. He was going at a level that we hadn't seen him go for a while. And he finishes as a top 10 wide receiver last year in Cleveland. I think we could see an Elijah Moore revival this year. I think that there's a chance that he has a pretty interesting target share. I think for me, one thing that this could do is David Njoku seems to be, and that's a tight end we're going to talk about today, but I think David Njoku's chances of being the number 2 target on the team kind of go out the window. I think it's going to be Elijah Moore. I think he gets that opportunity, and how much he cuts into Amari Cooper remains to be seen, because Amari Cooper was just so effective last year. But I think for Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's become like a guy that people were really excited that he could maybe take a leap as the wide receiver 2. He's clearly the wide receiver 3 to me. I think Elijah Moore can do a number of things. Donovan Peoples-Jones, not to be cliche, but I think he's a guy that will be a little bit better in best ball. But I'm interested in Elijah Moore there.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So Donovan Peoples-Jones, I mean, I had projected a massive leap here, and we saw the leap last year. He was sneaky good, kind of always in the top 35 in wide receiver weekly rankings in 2022. It's one of my most owned best ball players right now, so I was a little, upset to see Elijah Moore land here. But I do think this is going to hurt Njoku probably the most, right? They're running similar routes, across the middle, underneath. And we look at the target share. Prior to that, I had Njoku kind of in that Evan Engram, Kyle Pitts range in terms of output for the 2023 season from a PPR standpoint in tight end premium. Now this slides him in the Dalton Schultz and above Greg Dulcich area and Chigo. A small damper in production, but I still think that he has an opportunity to still produce as a tight end one, but it's more towards the back end now. In terms of DPJ, it's interesting because he has such good chemistry with Watson last year. When you're watching it, he consistently went to him on first reads at times, second reads at the latest. He was always looking DPJ's way. So I'm curious if that chemistry continues. It's clear Amari Cooper is the alpha and the top dog and is going to command the most targets on this team. But the number 2 spot, I still think it's up for grabs. I think it'll change on a week-to-week basis, whether that's Njoku, whether it's DPJ, whether it's Elijah Moore. I think we're going to see some sort of rotation at the number 2 most targeted receiving option in this offense in 2023 until they can get into a rhythm, and they'll probably establish somebody, but I think it will rotate on a week-to-week basis at first.
And one interesting thing is Deshaun Watson, because Deshaun Watson, nobody's really talking about with this. Like, Watson suddenly has some weapons there. Kareem Hunt is no longer a Cleveland Brown. Nick Chubb is there. Of course, Nick Chubb's going to get his, but maybe they're going to be a little bit less run heavy and a little bit more of a comfort level with letting Deshaun kind of expand his opportunities and just the passing volume in Cleveland. I think it'll be super interesting. That's a fun one to talk about, Billy, but I got to get your opinion on one thing here. What is the fantasy community going to do when Ezekiel Elliott signs with Philadelphia and gets like 3 times as much money as Rashad Penny?
Oh God. It's, from a fantasy perspective, it'd probably be a pretty good landing spot with the amount of goal line carries he's going to get. He'll be a pure goal line back. We're talking kind of like LeGarrette Blount, the year that we saw him inside New England. It's just all he did was score touchdowns and ran for 2 yards a carry, right? And then we saw the same thing with Jordan Howard when he came over, right? Was consistently used inside the goal line. They're probably looking to add that goal line back, and it's also just going to be a nice little dag, to Dallas is, hey, Philly, we got your running back now, right? And so I think this also could be like a psychological warfare from like Philly to Dallas. I don't really want to see it happen because we know it's just going to be this 3-man rotation, or now 4-man rotation. It's going to be Gainwell, it's going to be Penny, it's going to be Scott, it's going to be Ezekiel Elliott. It's going to be pretty gross, honestly. I don't really like the idea of it, quite frankly.
I think the only person who might like it is Nick Sirianni, who I think deep down might want to play 4 running backs or 3 running backs every single game. We talked with JJ yesterday. We talked about what happens if Bijan lands in Philadelphia and just sees all the volume, and then we see the Zeke rumor today. It's kind of a rumor put out by Zeke. I want to add that for our listeners. Zeke basically said the 3 teams he wants to sign with, and he mentioned the Eagles. One team is interesting though, Billy. This would be like an Ezekiel Elliott bounce. Ezekiel Elliott signing with Cincinnati would be kind of interesting. You have the Joe Mixon situation a little bit slightly up in the air. Nothing really, but these situations could always take a step south if more news is kind of dumped. If Zeke signs with Cincy, you got to kind of like that for his best ball value.
Yeah, I think we would see a jump in ADP, right? He's consistently going right now. I got him at FFPC the other day. I got him as running back 48 off the board, right? And if he lands inside Cincinnati, I'd probably expect him to see him somewhere in the 30s, honestly. Running back 34 through 37, depending upon what they do with Joe Mixon. If he ends up, ditching town, I wouldn't be surprised to see Zeke even jump even higher, just because we know they're going to have goal line opportunities. We know they're going to have short yardage. We know they're going to evolve in the passing game. There's going to be opportunities for him to produce there, even at this point in his career when he is quote unquote dusted, right? And we're making sure now at this point we're drafting off the name, right? But there is going to be certain landing spots where he's no longer dusted per se, and he's going to be able to produce simply because of the efficiencies of the offense. And I think Cincinnati's one of those.
And I think that sometimes we like to, even though Zeke looked like he was running with a piano on his back for the second half of the season last year.
A dusted piano.
like an old piano you find at like I don't even know, like some estate sale or something, Billy. It's like needs the keys adjusted. It's very dirty. Maybe it needs to get buffed, but it's a piano nonetheless. That's Zeke right there. I think that one thing, like these coaches and also like these owners, as we've seen with Jerry Jones, when they get like a big name veteran, there's always a little bit of internal pressure to try to find him a role. So if Zeke is okay and he lands in Cincy to kind of take over the Samaje Perine role, like a poor man's Samaje Perine, I could kind of see that. And how
2023 Ezekiel Elliott, poor man Samaje Perine. Where here we are, where we've officially arrived.
Hey, we're excited about Samaje Perine, man. And then the Jets, that doesn't do anything for you, right? If he signs with the Jets, it's like
God, the Jets are so gross. I would say it's safe to move Breece Hall down rankings if he signs with the Jets. I think that would be a sign that they aren't happy with or comfortable with where Breece Hall is inside of his recovery, and they want to add depth. I would say that's, rest in peace. Any Carter production left that was there. Rest in peace. Goal line carries for Breece Hall on a consistent basis. He'd still be the primary back when healthy, but it's going to be another mouth to feed and a back that, is really able to capitalize on opportunities in the red zone. So I don't like the outlook there for Breece Hall if Zeke does land there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's also one of those, I think it's kind of like when an NBA team is going for a title and you see all these veterans kind of joining up on one team. Like you think about like guys who have joined the Lakers late in their career. You have Odell Beckham being linked to the Jets. We think the Aaron Rodgers is going to go trade is going to go down to the Jets. So you're getting Odell, Zeke, Aaron Rodgers, all these old guys just, kind of like linking all together. I think there's also a little bit of that. So I don't know. I kind of liked Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight. I think those two guys, like being in a little training camp battle for the handcuff job, would have been interesting. But hey, if they bring in Zeke, you're absolutely right. We got to downgrade those guys significantly. Looking forward to talking some tight ends coming up though here, Billy.
Yeah. Before we jump into that, I want to ask you a question. Have you seen this TV that Epson Printers installed at Matt's house?
It's awesome.
It's awesome. Everybody, if you haven't seen it, stay tuned. We want to show you just what they did for Matt. They installed this gigantic screen that's perfect for watching sports. Stay tuned. Take a look at this. We'll be right back. $120 That's it. That's insane. I have an 80-inch TV at my house, and that thing just that's the thing's just gonna, dwarf it. Do you see that Matt next to that thing? Matt looks like, he's just like a kid next to, this giant TV. It's pretty impressive.
120 is absolutely a flex. I have a 90-inch TV. The Greminger household is rocking a 90. And I see that 120. I'm like to my wife, I'm like, I gotta upgrade it. She's like, you're nuts. We have a big enough TV, but I it's definitely on the short list of the next things I want to get. But Billy, we got to start a tight end show at the top. Travis Kelce in my show sheet here is, how are we treating him like in our FFPC leagues? And as a reminder to anybody who doesn't play FFPC, it's 1.5 points per reception for tight ends. So a guy like Travis Kelce in a normal PPR league will be a lock first round pick, but in FFPC, he's probably going closer to the top. It seems like in our best ball drafts, it's Justin Jefferson at the 1 most of the time. Then for me, the decision with Kelce starts at the 103. For you, it kind of started at the 102. What are your thoughts?
So every year, I think this is going to be the year where Travis Kelce starts to kind of fall off the cliff, but it just continues to be the focal point of the offense and the trusted target of Patrick Mahomes. I don't think that's going to be looking to change in 2023 as they continue to lean on each other and continue to produce. Travis Kelce, when I ran the projections in the FFPC and we utilized the script that Dario and I made in R, Travis Kelce came in at the 101 in FFPC rankings for replacement value. So what is replacement value? Like if it takes essentially like the entire pool of players, and it works in the code to say where should he be ranked if you had to replace this player inside of the other pool. And Kelce did land at the 101. As a player and as a drafter, I know that we can get Kelce at the 2, at the 3, at the 4. So I manually moved him down to, I think, player 3 inside the FFPC rankings. But I do want that to be noted in this call that when the script and the projections and the model was ran, he came as the default 101, and it was by a significant margin. From just a pure PPR output, Justin Jefferson has a 353.8 points in my projections, and you look at Travis Kelce in PPR, 314. That's not including the tight end premium. So if you include the tight end premium from a production standpoint, from a raw projections, Travis Kelce should technically be the 101 at FFPC. I think an argument can be made for you to select him there, but knowing that you can get him at the 3, at the 4 at times, it makes sense to just take him at a later point and mix in other players like Jamar Chase, Christian McCaffrey, and Justin Jefferson in the 1, 2, and 3 spots.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to me, and you say it very, very well. But we did see, it's wild. Travis Kelce, was 32 years old to start last season. He's 33 now. And he saw the most targets he's ever had in his career this past season, in the first season that the Tyreek Hill was gone from Kansas City. So like brushing it aside and saying, he gets a little bit older, so there'll be regression. I think that's the wrong way to treat Travis Kelce. He's a player that is absolutely aging gracefully. Yeah, a unicorn. And you rarely see him take a big hit. He's very, very nuanced in the way that he plays. He gets out of bounds when he needs to, and he really seems to have it down where he avoids that big hit. So like he's got a game that looks like it's going to age very well. I think how we treat Travis Kelce as a dynasty asset is also an interesting one, because does he have, I think it's a pretty decent bet that he could have 2 elite seasons left in him, with a chance that he could have another season that's like close to elite. So, you could kind of use that age against people, Billy. How long do you see him doing this?
I was telling people to sell Tom Brady in Dynasty for like 10 years. So I don't want to put a number on this because I feel like it's like deja vu all over again, but now for a tight end. Let me just read off how elite his production has been, right? So let's go back to his season logs. Okay. Starting all the way back in 2016, tight end number 2 in fantasy points per game. 2017, tight end number 2 in fantasy points per game. 2018, tight end number 1 in fantasy points per game. 2019, number 1. 2020, number 1. 2021, number 2. 2022, number 1. That is a remarkable feat, and he could be considered one of the best tight ends in history, in my opinion, when everything is said and done. And I was going to have to say, I don't see a scenario outside of injury in 2023 in which Travis Kelce does not finish as the tight end 1 again.
Let me throw out just a ballpark scenario to you. DeAndre Hopkins signs in Kansas City.
Still don't think it matters. I think at that point now it's a clear 1 and 2, and Kelce will continue to see third down and red zone opportunities.
I completely agree with you on that one. It's sort of like if another wide receiver is added, I think you adjust the way that the other wide receivers are treated.
Correct.
But it's not only like their whole game plan is based on Travis Kelce. They're actually in heavy 2 tight end sets and 3 tight end sets once in a while, a lot more than the average NFL team. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but they like Noah Gray catches a pass every single game. They're basically using 2 tight ends in order to feature Travis Kelce and make things harder on opposing defenses in terms of the packages they use. So Kelce and Mahomes have better chemistry than arguably any QB receiver combination at this point, and it's really hard to not take him. I think for me, I can't take him at the 1. I got to go Justin Jefferson. For me, I'm an ageist. I'm always going to go with the younger player over the older player, for better or for worse. That's always been my drafting strategy. But if I get a bunch of 101s in FFPC, I would mix in a little Kelce. But I think the majority of the time it's hard for me to do that. For me, it's the 2 spot. I really want to take Jamar Chase. You're a little bit more open with, the guys you would consider at the 102. For me, I just think Chase has that massive season in him that we haven't seen from him yet. Whereas Kelce, I think we saw it last season. I think he could emulate it, but it's going to be hard for him to beat it.
I'm also a lunatic and I draft with Dave. So we'll just create things just to have unique rosters, right? And if it's a donation, it's a donation. But we'll mix things up. Like we'll take, CeeDee Lamb in the 2-hole because no one's taking CeeDee Lamb in the 2-hole. And that opens up the turn for us, and it's going to create a roster that nobody else has because nobody else is taking CeeDee Lamb in the 2-hole, right? And so no one's going to have that CeeDee Lamb and Chubb team or CeeDee Lamb, Devonta Smith and Chubb team. It's going to be very rare. Otherwise they'd have to reach and get a value on another player in rounds 2 and 3. So the reason I will mix in Kelce at the 1 or 2 or 3 is also to create those unique rosters from an individual who's doing, volume drafting. But it's also, from a number standpoint, it makes sense from a projection standpoint. We don't need to spend too much time on Travis Kelce because everyone knows he's the tight end 1. But targets, number 1 in the league. Target share, number 3. Target rate, number 4. Slot snaps, number 3. Routes run, number 1. 5 and 49 routes. Air yards, 1,053, number 2 of the tight end position. Air yard share, number 3. Red zone targets, 30 red zone targets, number 1 in the tight end position. Receptions, 110, number 1. Receiving yards, 1,338, number 1. I mean, everything about this guy is just number 1, number 2, number 3, all top 10 in almost every single category on the site over at Player Profiler. Let's not beat the hammer. Let's not beat the drum or beat a dead horse. Let's move the next tight end.
Okay, so we all agree Kelce's number 1. The next 2 tight ends in our current best ball draft that is still going, Billy, it's slowly coming along here. Mark Andrews gets selected with the 208, and TJ Hockenson gets selected with the 302. Both of those guys are going to be in that range, maybe slightly higher in certain drafts, but they're both going to be gone before the mid-third, probably closer to the mid-second when the big money weeks come along. We are kind of against the grain here where we're both on TJ Hockenson as the tight end 2 overall. It's close, though. I love Hockenson. I think we've seen in such a short time of him being a Minnesota Viking, kind of his ceiling in that offense. We all saw how he did in the NFL playoffs. He was basically the New York Giant killer last year in 2 separate games, but he has such a ceiling in that offense. And I think that the Minnesota offense getting away from potentially Dalvin Cook now, that's still up in the air a little bit. Adam Thielen has moved on. I think everything's kind of shaping up for a TJ Hockenson smash season. Your thoughts on Hawk and why you prefer him to Mandrews?
I prefer Hockenson to Andrews just because I like the passing volume that we're going to see inside of Minnesota more than we're going to see inside of Baltimore. There's also the quarterback uncertainty with Lamar. Everything said and done, I still project Lamar to return to Baltimore and for him to have Andrews as number 1 target. If everything goes perfectly as planned, I think it's safe to say that Andrews will probably finish ahead of Hockenson because of the amount of targets that he's going to see from him just locking in on 1 target. And we're probably talking about a potential, number 1 most targeted tight end in the league. That being said, I like the consistency factor of Hockenson, and I like the fact that he's going to be heavily involved in the passing game, regardless of who else is going to be here. They just got rid of Adam Thielen. You talked about Dalvin Cook. There's a lot of opportunity available at the tight end of the target share and the distribution. Right, Adam Thielen roughly was 16 to 17% annually, and so Hockenson, we saw that trend down the stretch. I mean, Hockenson ended up finishing the year number 2 in targets, 129 targets. I have him projected for right now inside 2023, 139.8 targets. So as Dave would say yesterday in the podcast, that's 140 targets, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity here for TJ Hockenson with the loss of Thielen. We expect KJ Osborne to take a step forward, right, where he's probably going to see close to 29% target share. But outside that, it's pretty much a wasteland inside their receiving core. So I think that they are going to have to get running backs involved. If that's still going to be Cooks or not, to be determined. If it's, Madison will still be there. So there's going to be other outlets, but I still think Hockenson is going to be a major focal point in this offense. And if you look at the game logs down the stretch for TJ Hockenson, 16 targets in week 16, 12 targets in week 17, week 18 sucked. He had 1 right in the playoffs, then 11 targets against the Giants in week 19. So the usage was there, and not just the usage, but also the uses in the red zone. 4 red zone targets in week 16, 1 in 17, 1 in 19, right? Prior to that, middle of the season, he had stretches of 3, 1, 2, and 2, all red zone targets in back-to-back weeks with double-digit targets across games. So 9, 10, 9. 9 was kind of like the baseline targets in a game for TJ Hockenson, and I want that in tight end premium.
Yeah, I love it. Let's go a little galaxy braining right now, Billy. What is a scenario where Mark Andrews kind of makes us look foolish? I'll throw out that the Todd Monken factor, where they bring Todd Monken in from Georgia, and Monken at Georgia really featured the tight ends. Darnell Washington will be a first or second round pick in the NFL draft, and he was hardly even used. They had Brock Bowers, who's a Kyle Pitts level prospect, that sort of guy. But basically the bottom line is the tight end position was so featured in Georgia. I think that there is a chance that the pace of play ticks up in Baltimore to a point that Mark Andrews becomes a really good value this year. And I think that the fact that there's not a wide receiver that's necessarily taking targets away from Mark Andrews, whereas in Minnesota, you have Justin Jefferson, you bring up KJ Osborne, and then there's a chance they add another receiver. So I do think there's a chance that Mandrews is still tight end too. And the market's reflecting that. But is there like a scenario where you could see Mandrews just really having an awesome season?
It is, but it's going to rely on him keeping Lamar there, right? It's a lot of that is dependent there, because if he's gone, I'm going to probably say Andrews could potentially be tight end 4, right? There's a lot of wiggle room in these projections if Lamar holds out or he doesn't return to Baltimore. So it's going to be completely dependent upon Lamar, in my opinion, or them getting a veteran there in replacement of Lamar. And so those are the only two scenarios, in my opinion, that would allow him to finish as tight end 2.
My go-to Baltimore Ravens source says Lamar will be back in Baltimore this year, so I'm going to go with him on that. But I will say that if he's wrong, Billy, is there a chance that they replace Lamar Jackson with a placeholder and the passing volume goes way up? Could there be a scenario where the chemistry is gone, but the volume of passing is there to an extent that Andrews is targeted enough? Or would you just have concerns about the whole offense?
I would have concerns about the whole offense, right? And there's another variable here, it's Bateman, right? They still have hopes about his foot and his recovery, but the fact that we're still talking about his foot recovery even now in March is still a concern to me. And I think that it's a lot's going to be depending upon his other partners in the passing game, because if Bateman's there, great. It's another option for them not to double team him. But if they don't have Bateman there and it's just a bunch of scrubs, like it was last year, there's I think a real argument to be made that they're going to double team him and it's going to hurt him not having that other receiver.
It's fun talking about those two guys, and definitely two guys that we're totally fine with you drafting at cost right now in FFPC leagues. There's another tight end, though, that was basically the talk of the end of the summer. We talk about a preseason long reception for Kyle Pitts, and all of a sudden that ADP just started creeping up and up and up. And I may or may not have selected Kyle Pitts at the end of the first round in an FFPC main event last year. That's how confident I was in him. He was one of the worst picks at ADP you could have made in the FFPC. That was a team that was a disaster for me. Thankfully, I did well on some other teams, but Pitts last year was like the steam, and he reached that first round. Everybody was talking about him. There were certain people who liked him more than Kelce at the end of the summer. That was a tough one, but now we're starting to see him at an affordable ADP, Billy. In this particular draft we're in, he goes in the 4th round, as opposed to last year when you're having to take him in the early 2nd, late 1st in tight end premium. Let's call Kyle Pitts somewhere in the 4th or 5th round this year. Are you going to have exposure to him at that price?
Not a lot. I still don't think it's low enough. We just haven't seen the output that would, in my opinion, validate him going this high in drafts. I was expecting to see him somewhere in that 5 to 6 turn, like we saw last year with Goedert, right? And I just don't think that Arthur Smith has the stones to utilize Kyle Pitts in the manner in which we all wish as a fantasy manager. It's infuriating, quite frankly. And they when they do use him, they utilize him just incorrectly. They throw him out wide, and he's not creating mismatches against linebackers. And, he's being covered by cornerbacks, and he's not, as fast. It's not as big of a mismatch is what I'm trying to say. And so I don't like how they utilize him. I don't like the underutilization. I do think he's going to get better. I just don't know if 2023 is going to be the year in which it happens. I still think he's developing, and I still think this offense isn't quite ready for two massive target share, or target. I don't know the correct word I'm trying to look for here. Two people who are going to, command that much target share, because we still have Drake London here who commands a lot of targets as well. And so the amount that this offense runs, I'm kind of scared with Kyle Pitts ADP right now, and I don't like where he's going. Like, you take a look at my projections, right? And if you head over to the site, we have now FFPC specific projections. And so this is worked in with the tight end premium. I have Kyle Pitts as tight end 9, Theo. I have him behind Dallas Goedert, behind George Kittle, behind Pat Freiermuth, behind Darren Waller, and behind Evan Engram. From a talent perspective, and just from a raw athleticism standpoint, Kyle Pitts is up there at number 1, probably in my book, if not top 2 or 3 easily. But the utilization, the concerns of the offense, the amounts that they run, to me, doesn't warrant his draft going inside round 4 at FFPC. I just don't like it. I would start taking some exposure in round 5 to round 6. But at that point, why? I can wait and take someone like Pat Freiermuth later. I can wait and take someone like Darren Waller later. I can wait and take someone like Evan Engram later, who I know are going to have similar workloads somewhere in that, 90 target range, if not more, who have equal opportunity on their team to be the number 2 target in their offense and have a track record of success, who have a coach that utilize their skill sets accordingly. I am out on Kyle Pitts again in 2023.
So I won't be completely out, but I agree with you that there's a lot of red flags of taking him at that ADP. And Arthur Smith, the weirdo, is probably going to designing plays for Mac Hollins and Jonnu Smith as we speak. We're probably going to be annoyed at his usage for Drake London and Kyle Pitts again. So that's a headache I want to kind of avoid. But I don't know. To me, he's interesting because we often do see a leap from year 2 to year 3. If you treated Kyle Pitts like a normal tight end, and we didn't have this season, where if you just flipped it around and you had the rookie year last year and you had this past year being his rookie year, I think the trajectory would be a little different. So we have seen Kyle Pitts do it on an NFL field. But again, when you talk about his ADP here, you're talking about, Ramondre Stevenson, you're talking about Amari Cooper, you're talking about a number of these players, Najee Harris, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Pittman, DJ Moore. They're all going to be kind of in that range. So it's not necessarily, do you like Kyle Pitts? It's, do you like Kyle Pitts compared to the players around him? So I think we're pretty much on the same page. We really like the talent, not necessarily the situation. Want to talk about another tight end from your San Francisco 49ers is George Kittle. He's older. He's 29 now, and he's a little more affordable ADP-wise. So the days of George Kittle kind of challenging for tight end 1 in ADP are long gone. But can he be a guy that we can trust this season in San Francisco around a very crowded set of skill position players? Arguably, and I don't even think it's arguably, I think these are the most talented skill position players collectively that he's ever been around in San Francisco since he got there, with Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and Christian McCaffrey. You're the 49ers guy. Where are you at on George Kittle?
I think he's properly priced. I think regardless of who's at quarterback and what's going to happen, we're going to see a very similar usage from him. It was nice to see the latter half of 2022 and how he's utilized down the stretch. That's what you kind of expect from George Kittle when you take him where you take him. And, in my opinion, he has the athleticism and the ability to finish as tight end 1 in the league. It just breaks down to Kyle Shanahan and how they're going to utilize him on a week-to-week basis, because they have Deebo Samuel, because they have Christian McCaffrey. There's a lot of other weapons that they can utilize in a lot of different creative ways that they can attack defenses. Not crazy about the quarterback situation right now. I'm not necessarily a Lance believer. I was definitely a Purdy believer. It's unfortunate, with the ulnar nerve and him getting surgery and that delayed timeline. And so I think right now it's Lance's job to lose just because of that injury. And I don't think that's necessarily going to benefit George Kittle in 2023.
Yeah, so he's interesting to me because I think that with his ADP cost here, you can kind of be willing to kind of stomach the swings. Occasionally, I feel like you're going to run into these, George Kittle games where he doesn't make an impact, but he's still a tight end that's capable of putting up a 25-point week and winning you your week. So I think where he's priced, I think I'm kind of in on Kittle. He's also a guy that I think you can start kicking the tires on in Dynasty because people are worried about that age, but he's a phenomenal athlete. He has a massive contract, and he's a very popular 49er. So I think that your window for George Kittle in San Francisco is a little bit longer than I think certain people think. So Kittle, I'm kind of in on, and I'm borderline excited about him at his ADP. Again, in our best ball tournament we're doing now, he's drafted in the 4th round. So again, it's kind of like the opportunity cost thing. But I think you can, especially in best ball, do some very nice George Kittle builds. When it comes down to it in when we're in August and September in the main events, that'll be a little more interesting for me. But I think in best ball, I'm certainly in on George Kittle. Wanted to jump over to across the country to New York, a guy we talked about when he was moved, Darren Waller. We were both really excited when this happened. Now we have a little bit more time to think about it. How is his outlook? And I'll give you a head-to-head. Darren Waller in 2023 or another former Giant, Evan Engram, in 2023?
Oh, this was the debate last night in the debut episode of Man vs. Machine. I picked Darren Waller. The Machine, a.k.a. Dario, picked Evan Engram. I like the landing spot for Darren Waller simply because we know he's going to be utilized, right? They went out and traded a 3rd-round pick 100 for Darren Waller. Anytime someone gives up, capital inside the top 3 rounds, they're going to be utilized. On top of it, they took a look at this, wide receiver free agent class, and they said, hey, we need to give our now franchise quarterback some weapons because the likes of Sterling Shepard, who continues to see, season-ending injuries, the likes of Wan'Dale Robinson, the likes of Darius Slayton, Jeff Smith, Daniel Bellinger, just isn't getting it done. They even re-signed Isaiah Hodgins, right? None of this is screaming like dangerous to me from if I'm a DB inside the NFL. They went out and signed Paris Campbell, who's got speed. I like Paris Campbell. I like the fact that he was able to remain healthy last year. But when I take a look at Darren Waller, I say he immediately steps into an 18 to 20% target share. He immediately is going to see arguably the number 1 option in this offense, right? And when we look back at his success, that's what he was when he was with the Raiders. He was the number 1 option in their offense. And I know that Dable has never deployed a tight end in the same regard, but my argument last night on Man vs. Machine, if you haven't seen it, please go back and watch Man vs. Machine's debate show. I mentioned the fact that Dable has never had a tight end to this degree of athleticism that Darren Waller has, and the freakish ability for him just to create mismatches. So I think that they're going to utilize him as they would like a number 1. And I think that Darren Waller is in line for, 100 targets this season. So I would not be surprised to see him kind of regain form as a top option in the tight end landscape. I do think though that his days of being elite, the top 1, 2, 3 days are gone. I don't think that we're going to see that level of production from him. Can he surprise me and finish there? I think it's within the realm of possibilities, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah, I think you hit on a number of great points, and like the whole Dable doesn't use his tight end argument. With all due respect to the machine Dario, that's a tough argument to have because who's the best tight end he had in Buffalo? Dawson Knox. Yeah. I mean, it's been like a really, really scarce position for him, and he did have Dawson Knox finish as tight end 10. I know he did it behind the strength of catching touchdowns and not volume, but he got him inside the tight end 1 line. You're talking about a guy in Darren Waller who's had 2 90+ reception seasons in his career. He had 2 top 3 finishes at the tight end spot. And then he also had another year where he finished top 5 in tight end points per game. So the talent is there. the past fantasy production is there. And then I think just a simple way to go about trying to find a tight end you want to draft. You could listen to Billy and I talk about tight ends for 2 hours. You can listen to us talk about tight ends all summer long. You can listen to Dario and Billy argue about tight ends and man versus machine. But there's a very simple way of going about looking at tight ends. Do you think that your tight end can lead the team in targets? If you think that he can lead his team in targets, absolutely be in on him. And if you think that he can be top 2 in targets on his team, you should probably consider that player. If he doesn't finish top 2 in targets, he's going to need to have an exceptional profile, or maybe he's going to need to catch a ton of touchdown passes. And that certainly happens at the tight end spot. But I think when you look at these guys who can lead their team in targets, that's something you cannot discount. Mark Andrews checks that box, and Darren Waller certainly checks that box. So I'm very excited about him in New York. And you talk about Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones loves those short, low A-dot passes. Darren Waller can thrive in those. And Billy, I don't think they're done yet. I think they might add another receiver in the draft. And I think that offense could take a step forward, which also means Darren Waller will have more touchdown opportunities. So I'm in on Darren Waller at cost. Billy says that the days of him finishing as a top 3 tight end are over, but he doesn't need to be there. He just needs to have like a top 6 tight end season based on his current cost to pay off for us. So we're both in on him. Want to stay on the East Coast. In our current draft in the state of Pennsylvania, you have Dallas Goedert going at the 404, and then you have Pat Freiermuth going at the 703. To me, Pat Freiermuth is the much better value right now in terms of where people are drafting them. Freiermuth was very effective last season, ends up finishing inside like that top 7 among his position at the tight end. He's entering his 3rd season, and I think people are sleeping on him a little bit right now. I think Deontay Johnson and George Pickens kind of being near him in the target pecking order kind of keeps his cost a little bit low. But Dallas Goedert is the clear number 3 target in Philly. And Goedert, I think, won people a lot of money last year, but I think he might be being a little bit overdrafted right now in these FFPC drafts. Where are you at on those two? And your thoughts on Goedert at an inflated cost? Billy, you are muted.
Thank you. I have Goedert right now as tight end 4, so I actually like him ahead of George Kittle this year. I just like the offense and his usage and his consistent usage more than TJ Hockenson. And so if I have the option, I'm taking Goedert there, although I like the price of Freiermuth better, right? And I think just from a drafting standpoint, especially if you're doing volume or even more than 1 or 2 or 3 drafts, you need to expose yourself to different tight ends. I like where the ADP on Freiermuth. I also like his usage, right? And so we've consistently seen him get better, right? 79 targets in 2021 as a rookie, which was fantastic. We saw 98 targets last year. In my opinion, Freiermuth is the number 2 option on his team. And I think he's actually, Pickens, I still think is probably going to try to take that number 2 option from Freiermuth, but I still think that Pickens is the 3rd option in the passing game. And I love to see the usage that we saw from Freiermuth inside the red zone. I like to see, just how often they were attacking him down the field. He was number 4 in air yards, right? And so I think Freiermuth has a lot of paths to success. In the poker world, we'd say he has a lot of outs, right? He has a lot of outs to finish as a top-tier tight end. I don't think you can go wrong with either or, but I would probably just say mix them up in your drafts.
Yeah, you probably have the right approach there. Again, like for me, it's when we see these guys take massive ADP jumps, I always get a little bit apprehensive. I certainly don't have any issues with the talent of Dallas Goedert. I think he's an exceptional talent, but it's more about when it all comes down to it, Devonta Smith is elite and AJ Brown is elite. And I think there'll be certain blow up Dallas Goedert games, but we saw kind of a perfect storm of target consolidation with those 3 this past year, where if things change just a little bit slightly stylistically, and I don't think they'll change too much because, they made the Super Bowl and they were fantastic, but if things change just a little bit, I see Dallas Goedert suffering more than the big 2 wide receivers just because of how elite they are. So Goedert to me might be a little bit more of a purgatory guy at his current cost. He's a guy that, hey, give me all the Dallas Goedert in Dynasty. But when it comes down to it and the money's on the line, I don't know how much I'll have. Muth, I think, will rise up. I think the 7th round seems a little bit cheap for him. His ADP could be kind of like Dalton Schultz was in FFPC last year, whereas the summer kind of crept along, people kind of kept trying to move him towards that elite tier. But I think if you can get him in the 7th round of best ball, I think he's fantastic. Want to talk to you about 2 young tight ends that we talked about with JJ Zachariason yesterday, Chig Okonkwo and Greg Dulcich. We're both very interested in these guys. In our current draft that we're in, they both, Greg Dulcich goes in the 9th round and Chig goes in the 10th round. Your thoughts on those 2 guys?
Love them both. Back to back in my rankings. I have Dulcich 1 spot ahead at 11. And now with the Hamler news as well, I think that's going to kind of reconfirm my belief that Dulcich will probably lead him in those rankings. Chigo, I think what he did last year was anything short of miraculous from a production standpoint. And he looked like he's going to be a real difference maker in this league. That being said, the Tennessee Titans and the pass volume scare me a little bit. Considering what's happening at the quarterback position as well, there's some concerns. Looking at just from a raw projection standpoint, Dulcich I do have for more targets. Again, that relates to the passing volume of the 2 offenses, but I do think that both are in line for back end tight end 1 opportunity.
Yeah, these guys are super, super exciting. And, last year it was Trey McBride was the one that was the tight end 1 drafted by people in dynasty leagues. I certainly wish I could trade a couple of Trey McBride shares for Dulcich shares and Chig shares. I thankfully have a lot of Chig. Wish I had a little more Dulcich. I'll throw out, Billy, that there's a chance that we see Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton moved. And I think that would do a lot more for Dulcich to kind of even bump him up a little bit more. Sean Payton, I mean, they're very different players, but we've seen Sean Payton have great success with tight ends. You think of Jimmy Graham, you think Jared Cook had that one big year in New Orleans. I think that could be a kind of a way to kind of feature a guy that is easy to connect to. And Dulcich, we remember, was a former wide receiver in college, so he's got that big play potential too. And he struggled with injuries last year. So like Dulcich, I think has a chance to be a really, really big time breakout. And Chig was a guy that JJ is also very bullish on. We talked about yesterday between Robert Woods and Austin Hooper. It's very gross to even think about. That was 35% of Tennessee's targets. They're gone. So I think that Chig and Treylon Burks, those 2 guys both have great opportunities to take big leaps in year 2. Chig is a superior athlete at the tight end position. We also really like looking for like a next level athlete when we're talking about big time fantasy production. So Chig checks off a couple of boxes. I might be more in on those guys than a couple of the veterans that we talked about. Just in terms, if you ask me if I'm playing high volume and I could have exposure to those guys in the 9th and 10th round versus some of those elite guys, I think I'm on the cheaper, younger options, Billy.
Well, when you talked about it earlier, you said I want a tight end that's going to be, arguably the number 2 or the number 1 inside of the target share distribution. Right now, the projections I have, at least for Tennessee, Treylon Burks is the clear-cut 1. I think that's pretty evident. Wide receiver position is kind of gross, right? Outside of that. So Chig, in my opinion, is the number 2. I have projected for, 16% target share in this offense. What that means is a whole nother discussion because of the low volume. But I think that he has the opportunity to be the number 2 option in this offense. And we talked about his athleticism. I love it, right? We talk about his usage. I love it. And I think that he's only going to continue to blossom and develop as a player. There is a question here that I want to address. It was from Bruce Flash a bit ago. And he says, question: how do I handle the tight end position in FFPC leagues using player profiler rankings? The rankings are significantly lower at the tight end position compared to how my league mates view the position. So 2 things, Bruce, here. Not sure if you saw it, but we actually do have a drop down now specifically for FFPC. I have worked in the code 1 to have the tight end premium projections into the rankings there as well. I also, with Dario's help, the machine's help, I was able to add some code in there to consider ADP as well. But the overall overlay with tight end premium is just overlaid on my seasonal projections. And then we increase the tight end to tight end premium, which is 1.5 at FFPC, but they are separate rankings now at Player Profiler. That went live last week, so it's brand new. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly suggest going over there. I'm going to go ahead and put it inside the chat right now for everyone who hasn't seen it. So you can go on over right now to Player Profiler. That link will take you to the FFPC rankings, and it's actually tied right now to the tight end position, which is what we're discussing. Before we end, Theo, as well, we had someone also comment that, are we going to talk about some sleeper tight ends? And I know they weren't on the sheet, so I'm going to throw you a curveball here. And if we go over an hour, I don't care.
No, we can go as long as you want, Billy. I actually want to, before I, we answer the sleeper tight ends, I want to ask you about 2 or 3 guys. And guys, this is like, Billy is a super, super organized guy, meticulous with his rankings, meticulous with his thoughts and to his answers on our show sheet. But this is like your favorite rapper just dropping like a freestyle album. So I want to hear Billy freestyle here. Dalton Schultz in Houston. Do you have any hope for him in Houston?
I do. Yeah. I mean, again, we look at the options that are there, right? Let me pull up my rankings or my projections. Okay. So pull them up here. Let's go to the AFC South. All right. So we take a look at what they have currently, right? So we know they traded Brandon Cooks to Dallas. That's gone. Well, there's 22% of the target share. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Okay. Well, right now, their leading receivers are Robert Woods, Nico Collins, and John Mechie, if he's healthy enough to start camp, is the word on the street. So in my opinion, Dalton Schultz is the number 1 option in this offense. I haven't projected for 16% target share. That is 93.6 targets. Whereas Dave said yesterday, that is pretty much 94, right? And so I think that anytime you can see a tight end with 90 plus targets, in my opinion, he needs to be a priority add inside of your drafts. I know the offense isn't appealing. It's probably going to be pretty gross. We don't know exactly who's going to be starting at quarterback right now, but we do know one thing: this offense is probably going to be bad. And we do know another thing is their defense isn't the best. And so what does that mean? It means they're going to have a lot of opportunity to throw the ball. They're going to be playing from behind, and they're going to be, passing the ball significant amount of times every week. And that means a lot of opportunity for Dalton Schultz. So 16% target share is the projection right now. That's probably light in my opinion. I'm a pretty conservative ranker when it comes to target distribution, but 93.6 targets. I haven't projected for 3.6 touchdowns right now. Again, that might be a little light. Probably going to see more like 4 to 5. And that's going to give him, roughly right now in my tight end rankings, he comes out to be tight end number 10. So I'm taking him ahead of Njoku right now, especially after the news, the trade news with Elijah Moore. I'm taking him ahead of Dulcich. I'm taking him ahead of Chigo right now. Although I do have a lot of Chigo as one of my most owned tight ends because I like to wait.
Yeah, it's super interesting because I was like, I've never been a Dalton Schultz fan. Whether it's on Player Profiler podcast or the Goat District podcast, I've always kind of been negative towards Dalton Schultz, but he takes a 1-year prove it deal in Houston. That Houston's going to start most likely a rookie quarterback, at least at times during the year. And right now his target competition's like Nico Collins, John Mechie, and whoever they decide to draft. So to me, it's super interesting. Robert Woods as well is now a Houston Texan, correct? Yeah, Robert Woods. Yeah, but there's nobody.
Gross, but yes,
it's very gross. But I feel like it's actually like Schultz has like a decent floor. Like if you want a floor play at the tight end, like I think Schultz is there. I think his spike weeks are going to be way less frequent than in Dallas, where he'd have that big week that could win it for you. But again, I think he's going to settle into like round 10 ADP in FFPC. So he's going to be affordable this year. And can he lead the Houston Texans in targets this year? I think there's a wild scenario where he can. So am I grossly in on Dalton Schultz? I think I might be, Billy. We might have to edit this part of the show. Let's go rapid fire. Tyler Higbee.
Ooh, I like Higbee this year. This is another one. I had him one spot ahead of Chigo initially, but he moved one spot below. So he's tight end 14 right now in my rankings. You look, Allen Robinson is rumored to be on the trading block, and it is probably gone from LA. He hasn't done much. that leaves Cooper Kupp, and that's pretty much it, right? So let's take a look exactly at the names. Allen Robinson, probably gone. Van Jefferson's there. He's pretty much a burner. Tutu Atwell, okay, doesn't do much for me. Skowronek doesn't do much for me, okay? So it's Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee. What did we just say, Theo? We want a tight end who's going to be 1 or 2. We also take a look at what Tyler Higbee did in his game logs last year, and I think that we can see a similar trend heading 2023. He was underutilized kind of in the middle of the season, and then he really picked up at the end, and I know we had the Cooper Kupp injury, but still, even with Cooper Kupp on the field, weeks 1, 2, and 4, he saw double-digit targets, right? Then at the end, he saw 11 targets week 16, 7 week 18, right? But the beauty about all these were red zones. So week 15, 1 red zone attempt. We saw week 16, 4 red zone attempts. We saw 1 red zone attempt in 17, 1 red zone in 18, right? Double touchdowns against Denver in week 16. So I think that we can expect a similar usage like we saw down the stretch leading into 2023 for Higbee. I am oddly in on Higbee this year.
Yeah, it's funny because Higbee last year finishes great. He's like tight end, what is he, tight end 6 or something crazy like that. And in our current draft, he's tight end 16. I think that the chances of him finishing higher than tight end 16 are so strong. The chances of finishing lower than tight end 16 are very low. So does he have the potential to help you win the league or be a league winner? No, but he can be a very useful player for you in a tight end premium format like this. Now, in terms of, I'll go answer the sleeper question right now with this is where we're going to find our sleeper, Billy. We do not have clarity on the tight end in Dallas this year. Right now, it's Jake Ferguson. But
probably gonna draft somebody.
They're definitely going to draft somebody. They've been linked to Michael Mayer, who's my favorite tight end in this draft class. Then you have the Green Bay Packers, who in a lot of mock drafts have been linked to Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, Darnell Washington. They might take a tight end in the top 20 picks of the NFL draft. The Cincinnati Bengals, they don't have a tight end right now. Hayden Hurst is now a Carolina Panther. I don't think we can need to waste 10 seconds on Hayden Hurst, Billy. We'll talk about more interesting tight ends unless you want to go real Hursty.
I kind of wanted to go
okay,
deep.
So we'll go deep after them. Let's finish this one. So then you have,
I mean, if we're going to do an all tight end show, we might as well just embrace it and get totally disgusting here and start talking about Gesicki, Hayden Hurst, Juwan Johnson.
We're going for it. But let's finish this one. So Dallas, Green Bay, Cincinnati, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Miami Dolphins. That's where
Chargers got 2 tight ends.
Well, the Chargers have Gerald Everett, but they could potentially move on. They just
resent Parham too.
Are you in on Parham? I've seen Parham as a sleeper somewhere. Let's first start with that. So I like Gerald Everett if he's back, but there's a chance that they save some money by cutting him, and they've been linked to drafting a tight end. So are you in on Parham as this 6'8", guy who we've seen flash as a potential sleeper for you? I would be very much in on Gerald Everett if that situation is chilled out in Los Angeles.
I still think that ultimately Everett will re-sign. I don't think that they can rely on the health of Parham. We've seen now, 2 concussions?
Yes.
So, and the last one was scary, right? And so it's safe to say that another hit could potentially end his career. I hate to say it that way, but it's a real scenario. I'm just in on the Chargers offense in general, right? I'm high on Herbert. I'm high on Mike Williams. Those 2 I'm higher on than consensus, right? I have Herbert ranked ahead of Burrow in my rankings. That was part of the debate yesterday on Man vs. Machine. I talk about Kellen Moore joining this offense. Love the fact that he, was top 4 in the league in his offenses while he was with Dallas for the last 4 years. So I think that he brings a much needed factor to the Chargers offense, and they're going to get creative again with Herbert. Herbert also played hurt last year, right? He had the broken ribs, he had the shoulder injury. And so a healthy Herbert throwing the ball 650 plus times a game, regardless of who's at tight end there, I think is going to have a role and an opportunity. We know Keenan Allen will never play an entire season. He always has those soft tissue issues. Mike Williams, I always joke around and say he's the only player in the NFL that can land on his head and his ass in the same play. And so we know he goes up, he climbs the ladder, and he gets hurt. It just happens. So that's why people like Josh Palmer. That's why people attack the tight end position. That's why someone like Austin Eckler has such a large role, because we have these 2 really injury-prone 1 and 2 wide receivers that open up a lot of opportunity for the number 3 receiver, for the tight end, and for the running back. So regardless of who's at the tight end position inside the Chargers offense, I want a piece of them. I think it's going to be Everett this year. They'll probably involve Parham. I got Parham for 5.5% target share right now. I still have Everett slated for 10.5%. I think regardless of who's there, we'll probably see around 10% at that position. And I think that they'll be fantasy relevant. And so seeing that where we can get them in drafts, it's really appealing to me.
Somewhere in the multiverse, there is a Billy Muzio and a Theo Greminger discussing, like, Gerald Everett, is he tight end 2 overall this year? Because this guy's played on so many teams, but he's such a baller, and he continually will have like that game where he'll make like 2 or 3 spectacular plays, and you're like, wow, I wish somebody would just target this guy 110 times this year.
And then he drops the easiest passes in the world 2 plays later. It's maddening. It really is. There's a reason.
That Sean McVay's first draft pick for the Rams was Gerald Everett. He had, Jordan Reed aspirations for him. It just never happened. But yeah, so we're in on the Los Angeles Chargers tight end, thinking right now, if we had to bet on it, it's Gerald Everett. But if it changes, we're in on that position. So Billy, between Dallas, Green Bay, Cincinnati, and Miami, which of those 4 situations, sight unseen and not knowing who the lead tight end is, which of those 4 is giving you the most excitement?
It has to be Cincinnati. It's just the offense, right? It's Joe Burrow. It's them being able to get creative at the position. They're going to have 2 number 1s, a 1A and a 1B receiver in Jamar Chase and T Higgins, right? So there's a lot of pressure relieved from the tight end
Zeke Elliott
and potentially a dusted Zeke Elliott. So I think that whoever lands in Cincinnati, I think, is going to have an opportunity to produce. And whether that is purely a goal line opportunity or if it's a third down opportunity, whatever that package is, depending upon the player and their skill set, I think we'll have fantasy relevance in 2023.
Yeah, you got to be in on the Cincinnati tight end. I completely agree with you on that one. Green Bay's interesting just because we don't have you talked about early in the show about Elijah Moore. Like, they don't have that number 2 target. I think right now, especially with Alan Lazard leaving and heading to the Jets, like right now it's kind of like Christian Watson and then like a whole lot of question marks. So potentially that's a weird situation where you could have a number 2 target or even a number 1 target with that tight end. We also have potentially with Jordan Love. We don't know how he's going to be as a starter. Is he going to be a guy who really likes to target the tight end? I'm not sure. So those are interesting. We'll continue this rapid fire. Who would you rather roster, Dawson, Knox, or Cole Kmet?
Cole Kmet.
Me too. Even with the DJ Moore signing, it's just Cole Kmet, I think, is a cleaner profile, and he's more predictive week to week.
It's exactly what it's predictive. Like, his usage is there, right? Like, when you look at Dawson Knox, I'm going to pull up the stats right now, but his usage is, he makes his money in the red zone and scoring touchdowns, right? From a target standpoint, he only saw 65 last year, tight end 17. That's only 4.3 per game. It was even worse in 2021. He only saw 4.7 game. It was tight end 20 in targets. Target share, 2021, he saw 13% target share. He saw 12.8 last year. So again, not a huge focal point, at least from a target standpoint inside this offense, where if you go to somebody like Cole Kmet, it's significantly higher. I know that they added DJ Moore. They still have Claypool. I do expect this Bears offense to be much improved. I don't expect them to be at or near the bottom in pass attempts this year. They were literally dead last in pass attempts last year in the NFL. I believe, don't quote me on that. But I'm pretty sure it's there. But DJ Moore is going to come in, command 25.5, 26% target share. We're going to see Cole Kmet still float in that 15 to 16% range. I initially, prior to DJ Moore, had Cole Kmet projected for, mid 90s in terms of targets. I have him now for 80 on the dot. But I still have him, for over 500 yards. He comes in on my tight end rankings right now at FFPC tight end rankings as tight end 15. So right behind Chigo.
Yeah, so for me, I'm gonna take a different stance. I'm gonna say neither, because that's kind of the tight end.
That's cheating.
I know. So I'll say Cole Kmet if I had to.
Yeah,
best ball, I might go Knox though, because I think Knox is location in best ball. But so I'll say that there is kind of a tight end dead zone. those guys are like going in tight end like 12 through 18 range, where you usually see like a lot of guys fail. If you're gonna go into that range of the draft, just stick with Dulcich and Chig. Take those upside guys. But I think Billy kind of nailed that one. I'll give you one more. Juwan Johnson, who was close to leading the all tight ends in touchdowns last year, versus Trey McBride, a guy who we think could make a year 2 leap, especially with Zach Ertz having, health concerns and age concerns. Trey McBride or Juwan Johnson, Billy?
This is close. I'm gonna divert to my rankings here.
We're gonna keep asking questions until Billy his nose starts bleeding or something. We're gonna get him one of these.
My eyes are watering because it's the window's open and I get some dust or something coming in here. But we got Juwan Johnson versus who was it?
Trey McBride, Colorado State's finest. So
Trey McBride right now currently is tight end 18 in my projections. I have him in tight end premium FFPC, 148.3 fantasy points. Juwan Johnson comes in right now as tight end 20, 144.7. So we're splitting hairs here. It's literally a touchdown difference. It's not even a touchdown difference. We're talking about 3.5 fantasy points. So we're talking about 3 catches in FFPC at 0 yards per catch. So it's very close. It's safe to say that this is that we're at this point. It's left up to variance because anything can happen when we're projecting this close. I like the fact that Juwan Johnson has Derek Carr. I don't like the fact that Michael Thomas resigned. Rashid Shaheed actually had a pretty good campaign last year. Juwan Johnson, I think, is going to have some spike weeks, but he's not going to be, utilized as frequently. Where I think Trey McBride, let me pull up the projections. Trey McBride, let's go to NFC West and let's head on over. So we have Zach Ertz, who's coming off injury, right? He tore I think it was ACL. I don't remember the week. But McBride probably slotted to lead the tight end position, at least in the beginning of the season. We're expecting DeAndre Hopkins to be moved. DeAndre Hopkins currently on the team in projection, slotted for 22.5% target share. So that's going to open up 22% target share. That's a lot of targets to be opened up, right? I expect to see Rondale Moore take a bump. I expect to see Greg Dortch get a slight bump, Marquise Brown to get a bump, but I also expect Trey McBride to get a bump in the passing game as well. I'm going to go McBride here, especially if Hopkins is traded.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I liked having Juwan Johnson on a few of my teams, especially weeks that I started and he scored a touchdown. That was kind of fun. But I think Trey McBride does have a chance to have a real year 2 leap. And in Dynasty, Billy, we do not take L's. We just wait. So Trey McBride,
it's like the stock market. It's only a loss if it's only a loss if you sell.
Yeah, exactly. So I am hoping that Trey McBride takes a big leap forward. He was extremely productive in college at Colorado State. His numbers at Colorado State were wild, like really, really up there. And he was the number 1 tight end drafted last year in the whole NFL draft. And he was a guy that FFPC drafters really liked in Dynasty. So I think this could be a year 2 leap for him. Like you talked about, a lot of these tight ends, they don't do a whole lot as rookies, and then they take a big step forward. So I think Trey McBride could be one of those. Okay, Billy. Hayden Hurst.
One more. We'll do one more.
Hayden Hurst versus Mike Gesicki.
Ooh, I like
the 2 free agents. So Mike Gesicki. Yeah, me too. I like Mike Gesicki, and we talked about this the other day on the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast. Alan and the Podfather were not quite as interested in Gesicki.
Mike Gesicki is uber athletic. Like, people forget, he was a round 2 pick. He came from Penn State. He came out with a 4.54 40. He was 96th percentile in speed score. He was 99th percentile in burst score. He was 98th percentile in agility score. He was 100th percentile in catch radius. He is uber athletic. I remember people comparing him to like Vernon Davis, and I was extremely high on Gesicki coming out of college. Unfortunately, just was never utilized correctly. Another unfortunate situation is he lands in the Patriots, because it's just, you never know what the Patriots are going to do on a week-to-week basis. That being said, if they do have a history of repeating themselves, it's usage with the tight ends and it's 12 personnel. So I think there's a place where Gesicki and Hunter Henry are both utilized, especially with the wide receiver core they have.
We have had the locker room narrative. We've had the shower narrative. We've had all kinds of narratives. Now we have the coach that recruited me narrative. Bill O'Brien was the one who brought Mike Gesicki to Penn State. Massive recruit. Like Billy said, he was an uber athlete out of the state of New Jersey, was a massive recruit for Penn State. And Bill O'Brien finally gets a chance to coach him this year. And I think that Gesicki, we have seen have a 70+ reception season. He's a little bit underrated right now in best ball and in dynasty. We'll see where he settles into redraft, but I think he's kind of an appealing guy that might go around like a back end tight end 2 and could sneak his way up there. We still don't know which way New England's going to go in the NFL draft in terms of adding target competition, but you got to like Gesicki a lot more in New England than you do in Miami. Billy, this was awesome today talking tight ends with you. Apologies to Noah Fant stands. Apologies to Tyler Conklin stands. Apologies to Isaiah Likely stands, but we got to cut it off at some point. Are you excited that we're going to be able to talk about other positions next week on First Class Fantasy?
No, I think we just need to stick at tight ends for like the next month. We're gonna lean into it. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, let's go ahead and get the other positions worked in. I would say go ahead and leave some comments down inside the chat. Let us know who you want us to talk about, what positions you want us to talk about. We will take in your considerations. I'm also going to throw more community polls out there. So I'm going to throw a poll out there to see what you guys would like us to discuss. I would like, Theo, just to let our listeners decide, not every week, but on occasion, what we're going to be discussing for the upcoming shows. So I think it's safe to say we will listen to your feedback. We will implement some of that feedback, and we will continue to utilize it with our content.
Yeah, for sure. And we've had a lot of great feedback so far about the show. So we love hearing what you have to say. Again, if you didn't listen to our show with JJ Zachariason, go ahead and give it a listen. It came out yesterday. And if you didn't hear Billy Muzio and Dario Offstein on Man vs. Machine, you have to give that one a listen. It's awesome what you're doing with Dario. I think that's going to be a really fun pod all year. If you enjoyed my Dynasty talk, the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast comes out on Mondays with the Podfather and Alan Seslowski. And then, Billy, you have the Dominator as well. Maybe tell everybody about that.
Yeah, the Dominator launched yesterday, and it is a podcast designed around projections. So if you like what you heard today, we had a lot of projections worked into this call, but the Dominator will be 100% dedicated to Dario, who is the machine, me as the man.
Man versus Machine, yep.
Man versus Machine. We are going to be debating our projections on a week-to-week basis. He's going to be telling me where he thinks I'm wrong. I'm going to be telling him he's wrong. And we're going to be bringing in the human element to the rankings versus just the analytics versus the machine.
Wasn't that basically the same storyline of Terminator 2 with Skynet, Billy? Or I'm getting confused.
I am not 100% sure. I haven't seen Terminator in a long time.
There you go. Well, yeah, definitely join us next week. Next Thursday, we're going to be bringing you another awesome episode of First Class Fantasy. And Billy, maybe sign us out.
That's it, everybody. Have a good night, and thanks for joining us here on First Class Fantasy. We'll see you all back another time.